Hello, and welcome to A Perspective on Crime, a podcast that explores contemporary research in criminology. My University Freshers' Week was decades ago. I've got no idea what goes on for students today. I've two brilliant young sons of university age, and in an effort to preserve myself from a world of worry, I decided to adopt a don't ask, don't tell approach. TikTok offers some insights, and that alone tells me more than I feel comfortable knowing. One feature of my Freshers' Week was what today would be called retail pop-ups. Random stores seem to occupy every available corner of the campus, selling tie-dye throws, joss sticks, band t-shirts and posters. Oh, the posters. Reservoir Dog stills vied for attention with Train-Spotted movie posters. Oasis album cover art the size of a washing machine were everywhere, but one genre of poster that dominated the markets were Magic Eye posters. These Magic Eye posters were a curious blend of chaos and precision, seemingly random patterns that concealed intricate 3D images beneath the surface. Part of their magic lay in the challenge. Unlocking the image required patience, technique, and a touch of experience. 3 characteristics we explore today through the lens of domestic violence. Imagine the scene. A police car pulls up outside a house late on a Friday night. Neighbours have called in a disturbance. Shouting. Something smashes. A scream. 2 officers walk up to the door, not knowing what they're about to find. They're responding to what's logged as a domestic dispute, but that simple label hides a world of complexity. In those first few moments, standing on the doorstep, they have to make a snap judgment. Who is in danger? Who is the aggressor? Who have they been called to protect? These initial assessments are incredibly fraught with subjectivity and very often not what they seem on the surface. Today, we're going to delve into that complex moment, guided by a new piece of academic research that sheds a light on just how difficult this situation could be for everyone involved. The paper we're looking at is titled Who is the Victim? Exploring the Complexities of Misidentification. It's written by Charlotte Barlow and Sandra Walklate, and it was recently published in the journal Criminology Criminal Justice. Their research examines that challenging first contact, the moment when police have to decide who is the victim and who is the perpetrator in a domestic abuse call, particularly in cases involving the subtle and chronic pattern of coercive control. Importantly, they spoke to both victim survivors and police officers, giving the work a comprehensive and authoritative foundation. Through in-depth interviews with 10 women, all of whom had experienced domestic abuse and had interacted with the police, researchers reveal how it isn't a single act that shadows the perceptions of the police, but a consistent pattern of challenges that overlap, intersect, and ultimately complicate the way the police see and respond to their situation. One of the most powerful and recurring themes they identified was something called system abuse. This is where a perpetrator doesn't just abuse their partner, they learn to manipulate the entire criminal justice system to continue their abuse. The researchers share the story of a woman called Sandra. Her partners held her against a wall by her throat. A few hours later, the police arrive at the door. It turned out that he had called them, claiming that she was the one who'd been violent. In her own words, Sarah describes the shock of that moment. I just couldn't believe it. I went absolutely silent. I couldn't bring myself to say anything. I was so desperate to speak, say something, but the only way I can describe it is that I was shell-shocked. Sarah goes on to explain how her partner used this against her, solidifying his control. He thought that he'd won, because he'd got in there first with the police. He'd say things like, "What will you do now? The police will never believe you." And I just thought, he was right. This is a devastatingly effective tactic, turning the very people who are meant to offer protection into a tool of control. This experience is made even worse by the immense pressure victims feel to be what sociologist Niels Christie famously called the ideal victim. This is a concept that goes back decades, but it basically means that for someone to be seen as a true victim, they're expected to be weak, passive, and completely blameless. The women in this study felt that because they didn't fit this narrow, unrealistic stereotype, they were misjudged by the police. One woman, Anita, felt that she was instantly dismissed because, in her own words, she was either hysterical or angry when the police arrived. She felt that because she wasn't behaving like a typical victim, the police didn't see her that way. This is especially true for women who fought back, that weren't passive. Another woman, Tara, described this perfectly. She explained that her violence was a reaction to what he'd done to her, while his was entirely different. She said, "His violence to me was repeated. It was purposeful. He wanted to hurt me. There was malice and evil there. I think the type of person I am meant the police never really saw what I was going through as coercive control. I think they thought we were both as bad as each other. Like I say, because I was either quiet and didn't say anything, if they blindsided me, or I was angry when they turned up as I just didn't want them there. I think they just had an idea of who I was in their head, and it wasn't a victim. So that influenced everything, really." Because she resisted, she felt she was not seen as a victim, but as an equal participant in a fight. This misconception was often compounded by the presence of alcohol. 6 of the 10 women interviewed said that when they or their partner had been drinking, police were far more likely to dismiss the situation. It was framed not as abuse, but as a drunken argument or a classic 6 of one and half a dozen of the other scenario. The story of Leslie is particularly chilling. She described an incident where police arrived after a neighbour had called. Her partner, she says, stood there, calm, apologising for her behaviour. He told the officers she was drunk and having one of her episodes. The result was that one of the male police officers told Leslie to calm down and control herself before turning to her abuser and saying, "Can you please control your partner?" In that moment, the police officer didn't just fail to identify the victim, they actively sided with the perpetrator and instructed him to exert more of the very control that defined the abuse. Finally, the women felt that the police consistently failed to see the bigger picture. Their approach was focused solely on the single incident that they were called to, what the researchers call an incident-based approach. They couldn't, or wouldn't, look beyond the immediate chaos and see the long-running pattern of fear and intimidation that's the landmark of coercive control. Aisha, another participant, articulated this frustration with incredible clarity. She said, "They look at what's in front of them and not beyond that. But coercive control isn't something you can really see. It's only when you look at it all together that you can start to put the pieces of the puzzle together." But are the police realistically going to do that every time? I don't think so. The cumulative effect of all these experiences of being manipulated, of not fitting the victim mould, of being dismissed because of alcohol, of being seen as just one part of an isolated incident, was that many of the women lost all faith in the police. They felt stupid, shut down, and unwilling to ever call for help again. This is a damning picture. It's easy to listen to these stories and feel a sense of anger at the police's response. But Barlow and Walklate research compels us to pause that judgment and step inside the police car to understand the immense, conflicting pressures officers face from the moment the call comes in. To get their side of the story, the researchers interviewed 15 police officers, most of whom were frontline responders, and their perspective reveals the systematic constraints that they operate under. Interestingly, Analysis of police case files done for the study provided an important piece of context. It found 5 examples of cases where a man called the police complaining the woman had harmed him, yet in all 5 of those cases, after further investigation, the woman is still recorded as a victim. This tells us that while the initial high-stakes moment of contact can go terribly wrong for victims, the system can sometimes correct itself later. But it's that initial moment, the one filled with confusion and pressure, that we need to understand. The officers explain that their response is often shaped before they even arrive at the scene. The information they get from the control room and the priority level it's assigned frames the entire encounter. A call about an immediate physical assault gets an emergency response, but a call that hints at the less visible patterns of coercive control might be scheduled for an appointment in 3 days' time. One officer admitted, quite frankly, that the decision whether or not to arrest is often made before they even get there. When they do arrive, their primary focus, as they see it, is on 2 things: safeguarding and positive action. Now, positive action doesn't just mean making an arrest. Officers explained it can involve a whole range of responses: charging the suspect, placing them in police custody, putting a non-molestation order in place, supporting the victim in changing the locks in their home, or putting a vulnerable domestic violence marker on the address so that future call-outs are treated with more urgency. The goal is to make the immediate situation safe, even if an arrest isn't possible or appropriate at that moment. Crucially, the officers themselves recognise the importance of what they call digging deeper. They were aware that they needed to look beyond the surface level incident. They knew that perpetrators can be, in the words of one senior officer, very manipulative people. Here we see the central paradox of the whole issue. Police know, in theory, that manipulation is a common tactic. Yet the victim's stories show us that in the heat of the moment, faced with a calm perpetrator, a distressed victim who doesn't fit the ideal mould, and the pressure to resolve the situation quickly, that theoretical knowledge is often not enough. The reality of the performance can overwhelm the principle. One officer, identified as police participant 4, shared a powerful example on the limitations of the first response and why that digging is so vital later on. He described a call where a neighbour had responded to shouting and smashing. When they arrived, both the man and the woman had physical marks on them. The man was furious, and the woman, who didn't speak English well, clearly didn't want them there. At face value, it looked like a mutual fight, but the officer explained that the more digging that was done later, the clearer it became that the man was incredibly controlling. But, he reflected, in that first response, they could only go with the information they had. And because of all the complexities, the situation was, as he put it, all a bit cloudy. When asked directly about misidentification, most officers said they didn't think it was common. Many could recall ambiguous cases, especially when factors like alcohol were involved or when they had incomplete information. They're acutely aware of the conditions they work under. As police participant 9 explained, if we were going to a case that was one of 12 on any given day, the reality is we're basing our decisions on what we've been available to us there and then, so sometimes we make the wrong judgments. This isn't an excuse, but a stark admission of the reality of frontline policing. Limited time, limited information, and immense pressure to make the right call. It's clear that both victims and police are describing a situation fraught with complexity, ambiguity, and the potential for devastating mistakes. To really grasp why this research is so important, we need to understand the legal landscape here in the UK. In 2015, the law in England and Wales changed significantly with the introduction of the coercive and controlling behaviour offence. This was a landmark piece of legislation because it recognised for the first time that domestic abuse is not just about a single incident of physical violence. Coercive control is designed as a course of conduct. It's a purposeful pattern of behaviour over time. It can include isolating someone, controlling their finances, constant monitoring and demeaning of them. It's about creating a world of fear and intimidation, and this is the central conflict of the entire story we're exploring today. A law was created to see patterns, but police are trained to respond to incidents. A fundamental mismatch is the engine of the entire problem. An officer arriving at a single incident will almost certainly miss the months and years of control that led up to it. The problem also taps into a much older, deeper issue, the historic difficulty women have faced in being seen as credible by the criminal justice system. There's a long, well-documented history of women's testimony being doubted and dismissed. Understanding these overlapping issues, a new law designed to see patterns, a policing model designed to see incidents, and a cultural history of disbelieving women is key to making sense of the difficulties at play. The author's own analysis provides a clear way to see how all these factors connect and lead to failure. To address these complex, interlocking problems, Barlow and Walklate developed a framework that they call the 5 M's to act as a diagnostic tool, helping us to see exactly how a series of small failures can cascade into a catastrophic one. The first M is manipulation. This is Sarah's story. It's her partner calling the police first, performing calmness and rationality to turn the very system meant to protect her into another weapon against her. The second M is misunderstanding. This is the fundamental clash we just talked about. The officer is looking for evidence of a crime that is happening right now, while the victim is living through a crime that has been happening for years. It's why Aisha felt that the police could never see beyond what was right in front of them. The third is miscommunication. This is Anitha, being dismissed as a hysterical woman when she was terrified. It's the immense difficulty a survivor has in trying to articulate long-term trauma in a few short minutes to a stranger, especially when they don't conform to the ideal victim stereotype of being passive and fearful. It's Tara, being seen as angry when she just didn't want them there. The fourth M is minimisation. This is Leslie, being told her experience was just a drunken argument. When manipulation, misunderstanding and miscommunication are all at play, it can lead officers to downplay the severity of a woman's experience, preventing them from seeing the underlying pattern of abuse. And finally, all this leads to the fifth and most damaging, misidentification. This is the ultimate outcome where the other 4 M's converge. It's the moment Leslie's partner is told to control her. It's the moment the victim is wrongly labelled as an offender, or when both parties are seen as equally to blame, leaving the true perpetrator unaccountable and the victim feeling abandoned and even more trapped. The 5 M's show us that misidentification is rarely a simple one-off mistake. It's the predictable result of a chain of systemic and perceptual failures. So, what then is the ultimate takeaway from all this? The single most important message from the research is that the moment a police officer arrives at a domestic abuse call, it's one of the most complex and high-stake interactions in all of policing. Getting it right isn't about following a simple checklist. To reveal the hidden image in a magic eye poster, people leaned in and stared intently, often adopting hands-on-hip stances. Onlookers shared conflicting strategies: cross your eyes, squint, just relax. Each tip a hopeful attempt to unlock the illusion. Response officers are asked to unlock the chaotic image they are presented with, moving beyond surface appearances, snap judgments and damaging stereotypes. It requires time, training and a fundamental shift in perspective. As Barlow and Walklate conclude, citing the work of Epstein and Goodman, the crucial first step is a cultural shift away from an automatic, uninformed disbelief of women's stories, and a move towards a default position of listening and, crucially, of believing. Starting from a place of belief and taking the time to truly listen is the most important step that can be taken to improve the experience of this complex and vital policing moment. Thank you for joining me in this episode of A Perspective on Crime. The research we've been discussing today is from the paper Who is the Victim? Exploring the Complexities and Misidentification by Charlotte Barlow and Sandra Walklate. It was published in the Journal of Criminology and Criminal Justice. For anyone interested in reading the work for themselves, which of course I would encourage, a direct link to the research is in the show notes. Until next time, goodbye.